I second that.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Michelle, Queens Republican, President for the 2015 year.
Bianca Perez, Secretary.
Commissioners from my left, please introduce yourself.
Simon Schmoon, Kings Republican.
Frederick Humane, Manhattan Republican.
Alan Shulkin, Manhattan Democrat.
John Plateau, Kings County Democrat.
Marie Costello, Richmond Democrat.
Jose Roger, please, Democrat.
Okay, senior staff. Mr.
Michael
Ryan.
Ryan, Executive Director.
Pamela Perkins, Administrative Manager.
Georgia Kuzamanis, Operations Manager.
Troy Johnson, CRU.
Matt Graves, CRU.
Kenneth Moulton, Council of Commissioners. Stephen Dankberg, Council of Commissioners.
Steve Richmond, General Counsel.
Valerie Vasquez, Director of Communications.
Rafael Smino, Deputy General Counsel.
Okay, anything added to the agenda?
Police personnel matters.
Personnel matter for Queens, from the Bronx, and Manhattan. Okay, for executive session.
We also have a litigation issue for executive sessions.
Okay. The minutes for 3/17/15, do I have a motion? Has everybody read them? Second. All in favor? Opposed? Carries. Michael Ryan, you're up.
Okay, we'll start with 2E first. This should be relatively easy enough. We have the draft notices for the draft notices to candidates. We're just looking to get commissioner approval. I think they should be attached in the commissioner's handouts. It should be a packet. They're the standard language. CRU prepared them, and legal has reviewed them. I've reviewed them as well, and we're just asking for approval. That would be for, in this case, for the special, which would be both Brooklyn and Staten Island.
I move that we adopt the draft, the notice to candidates for the May 5th special election.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Carries.
On the 17th, which is a religious holiday for some, on March the 17th, as I was not here, my understanding is that there was some colloquy back and forth amongst the commissioners and staff with respect to ballot layout, and there was a request from the commissioners for the staff to do a review of whether or not, and my understanding the request came from Commissioner Castorina, but he's not here, but there was a request about landscape ballots, and staff has reviewed the ballots and the software and the ability to do it, and I'm handing out a sample, and I believe we have a few extra for the audience if necessary. The software works, and it is possible to do a landscape ballot, but based on the testing and the analysis of staff, it would seem that utilizing a landscape ballot would only be doable, for lack of a better word, in a special election, because of the depth of the ballots. When we have more complex primaries and general elections, that we just don't have enough depth on the ballot to do a landscape ballot, and that we would need to, going wider doesn't help when you need to go further down. So if, it's certainly something to consider down the road, that if the commissioners would like to utilize a landscape ballot in a special election when there is sufficient room, that it certainly, it can be done on the machine. It's just a question of whether or not the commissioners want to move in that direction.
Right, I think one of the big things was they understand about the ballot, I'm not putting it, but the main concern is that we found out at the last minute.
Right.
And I think we would like to know as early as possible, and I think there was a discussion, it was almost 12 days that they could have been informing us way before this. And we also have a ballot committee which did not know anything about it.
Correct.
So I think it was more that we got hit with it and we gotta go vote on it right away.
And that
So I
is,
think that's the biggest problem, besides landscaping, we have time to figure all this out, if we, as commissioners, got the information way in advance.
that is certainly a concern. It was my concern. It was addressed with the relevant members of staff immediately when I found out that what was happening. I think it was taken for granted that since it was going to be a relatively non-complex ballot, that this was just something that was going to be handled in the regular course of business without a lot of fanfare. I explained to the staff members that is not the way things are to be done. I believe that message was received loudly and clearly, although I did not raise my voice, as I have a tendency not to do that.
Metaphorically.
Metaphorically speaking, correct. And I don't anticipate that will happen again. And in order to address the issues like that, not just ballot issues, but anything related to elections, we had our managers meeting yesterday, and one of the things, again, I hate to keep calling her out, but one of the things that Georgia Consumatis is going to be spearheading is establishing, working with MIS and the various departments, a master calendar for all of the different election cycles that we do, whether it be a presidential, gubernatorial, mayor, or off year, and have that built into a master matrix, and then able to be broken down into subsets. And what we'll start out doing is we'll do it generically, you know, say, whatever, 45 days out, this has to happen. And then, in the individual election year, we'll plug out the generic days and plug in actual dates. And then that will be distributed to the commissioners, which will then be our, you know, individual and collective guideposts to say, this is when you should be expecting information from us. And that will hopefully take a lot of the mystery out of it, and also eliminate some of the individual judgments that can always be the subject of second guessing moving on.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
This is only, the same ballot is only distributed among us, right?
Yes, I mean, there's.
The reason I ask is it still has the Democratic candidate, Diana Richardson. I
Right.
don't want anybody to misunderstand it.
No, that was just simply done for illustrative purposes, to show that it could happen. I mean, it was, you know, designed to be done quickly in-house so
But
that
just for us.
the testing could be done. Yeah, it's not the, it's not, it's a
Saying that
sample,
it gives a
right,
problem to everybody.
right.
Is there still time to adopt the landscape ballot for the May 5th special?
No,
elections?
and truth be told, there really wasn't time, even on the 17th, if the vote was taken at that point, because the military and absentee ballots had to go out, and the law is clear that they have to be in the same form. So the military absentee ballots were done in a portrait, and basically, at that point, everyone's hands were tied, which underscores, I believe, Commissioner Michel's concern that this information get shared, you know, in a more timely manner.
It's all of our concern.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's more of an issue now because we have more parties. And so with a special election or a smaller election, we're now, we have the snake, the horrible asp of candidacies. And so that's why this became even more relevant to us. And well, we couldn't do it this time around. At least we'll know for the future that this is an option for us.
And I mean, Mr. Norris is here. He can explain to you guys the technical details if you so wish. But suffice to say, they developed the ballot, they tested it, and it worked. So the software
Okay,
obviously
so,
can
but
handle
in
it.
the future, we'll know in advance.
Right.
Could we have copies of the finalized ballots for the 11th CD and the 43rd AD specials?
Yes, and how are we doing, Mr. Norris? The finalized ballots, when we discussed it yesterday, we thought perhaps today, but maybe as late as tomorrow, the final ballots will be ready to go.
Election day ballots and the affidavit ballots were finished proofing this morning by CRU and the translators, so they would be available for samples for the commissioners.
Okay. Very good.
Can we have copies before we leave here today?
Certainly.
They just finished them this morning. So, John, when are they going up?
The website?
Yes,
It will go up to the website tomorrow.
tomorrow, okay. Anything else on that?
No.
Okay. On the 24th of March, going to item 2B, on the 24th of March, a contingent of folks from the board went to Albany to have meetings with various legislators with respect to our legislative agenda moving forward.
I'm sorry, could I ask one more question on the previous item? Will there be any rotation on the ballots for the May 5th special?
No.
Of candidates? No.
General
So,
election is never.
so the copies we receive here will appear that way across the board throughout those two districts?
Yes.
Okay.
No, we don't. No?
It's our interpretation
Yeah.
that we follow the paper
Paper
ballot
ballot.
rules, not the machine ballots.
And as a matter of fact, I believe that there was some discussion, there is a particular bill that's floating around that has not received Senate support that would require rotation, and for a whole host of reasons, we are happy that that hasn't happened.
One more question. What determines the prioritizational order of the candidates on the ballot?
By statute, the 8 political parties appear in the order of the number of votes the candidate for governor received last year. The independent bodies, and in this case there's only one, it's easier, it's in the order in which they submit what appears to be a cover sheet and a sufficient number of signatures to qualify for the ballot. They get the first line and each one successive.
But Steve, we were talking about rotation, so that
No, he
means...
asked for the,
No, okay.
Oh, what
it's general,
determines-
for general or special elections, that's how we determine independent bodies.
But if we're talking about a rotation, then we are by definition talking about a primary, right? So there is a method that we use for primaries in order to determine the stack of the ballot. So
That's right,
that,
for primaries,
so
random
just for
draw.
clarification, because we seem to be mixing two conversations, I want to make sure that they're separate. All right, you have your ballot order in a sense for the specials and the generals, but then you have the ballot.
The candidates within the ballot order for the primaries are determined in accordance with the State Board of Elections rules. We've adopted, for lack of a better term, the bingo system, where we rotate the names and they come out of the draw, and that's the order that they'll appear on the primary ballot within that contest.
And in a general or special, the order is the number of votes that line received in the last gubernatorial general election.
For those parties that received official ballot status, the 8 parties.
Right.
Yes.
And then if there is, I'll use the word snake so I'm not misunderstood. I don't enunciate as well as Commissioner Humane. And if there is a snaking, then the commissioners ultimately determine where
The second row.
the second row is going to.
Left to right or right to
Right.
left.
Right, yeah, so there's a level of complexity to this process that is not always appreciated outside the four walls of this building. But I hope we're making it as clear as we can. All right, so I think we were moving on to B.
You want B.
B, we had various staff members as well as 5 commissioners were in attendance in Albany last Tuesday. They were Commissioner Castorina, Commissioner Shimon, Commissioner Humane, that's 3. We had Commissioner Guastella and Commissioner Shulkin. And we had a jam-packed agenda. that went right up to the end of the day. We met with various lawmakers. We had a good day discussing all legislative proposals. And I believe it was Chairman Funky from the Senate Elections Committee that indicated that it was a good idea that we got up earlier than we had done in the past, so that they have some time to maybe work on some of these statutes, you know, before the end of the year. We've also have an agreement to meet amongst to try to put the Senate and the Assembly together, as well as our staff, to work on some of the what I will call an expansion, if you will, or maybe the next step from the Kavanaugh kind of ballot-friendly bill that was enacted in some portion. So hopefully there's going to be some things, and I think Commissioner Shimon aptly put that there should be certain things that we can come to absolute agreement on without a lot of fanfare and a lot of difficulty. One of the things I think that was used as an illustrative example was the placing of a bolder line around a particular contest, so that people don't get confused and they know that that contest is demarked by that bolder line. So there's a whole host of things that could potentially become law, but until we have consensus amongst the Assembly and the Senate, we can't say what those things are. So suffice to say, we're working on it. We're sensitive to the needs of the voters, and that we are working with our legislators to try to come up with some reasonable solutions that everybody can live with, and within what we interpret the law to be presently. We do the best we can with a very complex ballot in New York City, and one that's seemingly becoming more complex with each passing day. So I think that we had a good round of conversations where we met with various legislators and representative from the governor's office, and they received our legislative package, which is part of the public discourse already, and I think that went very well. I am prepared to move on to, I guess we can move on. We have two folks in the audience, and I believe, if I'm correct, you guys were here at a meeting, I think both folks were here, but I'm going to ask Susan Lerner from Common Cause and Seth Flaxman from Democracy Works. I wanted to say Democracy Speaks, but I knew that was wrong. But I guess it does both. But the name of the organization is Democracy Works. And basically, the commissioners and everyone is aware that the City Council has attempted to make to pass a law requiring us to track absentee ballots. Now, let's lay off to the side for a second whether or not the City Council has the authority to do that unilaterally and to essentially try to shape elections in a spot where typically the state legislature stands. Leave that argument off to the side. The idea is not Bonnie brand new, as they say in the parlance. It's been out there for a while. So whether or not we're ultimately legislatively mandated to do it, or or we do it on our own. Myself and after Ms. Lerner and Mr. Flaxman had come before the Commissioners Committee, myself and Ms. Sandow met with them, and we discussed where we could go from here. What could be some next steps? How can we service the voters better? And one thing that we were informed is that, separate and apart from government funding, there is the Knight News Challenge. The Knight Foundation has some monies available to assist in helping local boards of elections assist the voters better. My understanding is it's about a $3 million grant package, and that the grants can range anywhere from, say, $100,000 to $800,000. We would have to put a grant package together, and certainly the commissioners would weigh in on assuming that we get the green light to move forward, we'd have to put this together for the commissioners to weigh in on exactly what the package would include. In any event, in order to potentially be considered for the grant, there was a deadline of March the 19th that a preliminary application had to be put in as a placeholder. That was done, and it was not mentioned that it would be the city of New York, so that it would not run afoul of any rules, not the least of which is the commission's authority to say yes or no with respect to it. But in order to preserve the opportunity potentially, that was done. And now, Mr. Flaxman, what's the next deadline we have?
So we have till, you're on April 10th.
April 10th. All right, so the bottom line is, myself and Ms. Sandow spoke, with Mr. Flaxman and Ms. Lerner, and in addition to tracking absentee ballots, so that the voters would have a better sense of where their ballot was during the process, it is possible, utilizing the free software that already exists with the post office and certain modifications made to that we could use a tracking system to track all of our mailings, that it doesn't have to be limited to ballots. It could be the voter information notices, the poll site change notices, intent to cancel letters, or all of the notices that we send out, we could ultimately track if we were able to have the system. And just from a purely myopic and somewhat selfish perspective, I seem to be always the one that's answering the questions with respect to, I didn't get my poll site change notice. And then I have to, what we do now, which is even a step forward from what we were doing in the past, is we reach out to Vanguard, who does our printing, and they give us the printout, which is basically a PDF copy of the mailer that went out to the individual, and then I attach that to a letter saying, I don't know how you didn't get your notice, because here's the copy of the notice that we sent. This would streamline that process immensely, and I think that at this juncture, I would like to turn it over to Ms. Lerner and Mr. Flaxman for anything that they want to add, and then we can open it up to the commissioners for discussion to see if we think that this is a good idea to try to pursue moving forward.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Night News Challenge so that you have context. It is a competitive application process, and I have printed out from the Knight Foundation website background information about it. This year's Night News Challenge asks applicants to answer the question, how might we better inform voters and increase civic participation before, during, and after elections? So this little one-page document, which I asked Valerie to pass around, is basic information about the Knight Foundation that comes from the Knight Foundation's website. The Knight Foundation, which was founded by the family that set up the community newspapers, the Knight that you know of as the Knight Ridder newspapers, endowed a foundation. Currently, it's the 45th largest foundation in the country in terms of its assets. In 2012, it gave out slightly more than $98 million. And they're very interested in helping with civic engagement. And the Night News Challenge is a competitive process that they've had running for several years now. So you've got some background information about it, about the deadlines. And applying for it is, of course, not a guarantee that we would get it, but frankly, we think that working with the city may be very interesting to the foundation because of who the Board of Elections is and the importance of New York City. So I'd like to ask Seth to talk a bit about the technical background and the tools which his organization has put together and how that could help the board if indeed we're authorized to move forward with the application and identify New York City as our city partner.
Great, thank you. So thank you. It's great to be able to speak with all of you. I spoke with some of you at the Outreach Committee. It's great to be back so soon. I run a nonprofit, tech nonprofit that was born based in Brooklyn still. And just two relevant things actually about the Knight Foundation first. One is that our Knight Foundation is also our largest supporter. Over the last 3 years, our nonprofit has received around $2 million in funding from the Knight Foundation, so they're a big backer of ours. And we specifically build technology to make voting easier and also to help election officials serve voters better. We saw a need in the market where election officials wanted to do cooler things with technology than the vendors were allowing them to do. The other thing I'll mention about the Knight Foundation is that there are other cities and states that are entering the News Challenge, so New York City would not be the only one, and this is not that unusual for a city to have its name in the ring. This year alone, I think LA, San Francisco, and then the states of Missouri and Montana are all entering the News Challenge. And Knight is I think they're reputable, middle of the road, they're journalistic values, and they're not really seen as being political. So in terms of our technology, we produce sort of two different tools that we're thinking of being able to use, allow New York City to use based on this grant. And the first one is ballot tracking. So there's a postal service tool called IMB, which is Intelligent Mail Barcodes. It's a free service from the postal system, but it's not that easy to implement. So we basically created a tool that makes it easy to put these barcodes on mail pieces and then allows election officials to have a dashboard seeing where all their mail pieces are and then also communicate that information to voters. So we could set up a system where a voter could just look up online where their ballot is or piece of mail, or we could set up text message. A voter could opt in for a text message reminder telling them, oh, your ballot was received by the election office or your ballot was mailed out. And that actually goes to the other piece of technology we build, which is a text and email notification tool. So we could, including in this, you could allow voters who aren't voting absentee, for example, they could opt in to receive text message reminders of where their polling places are. And that's all based on the same technology. And I'll close. That's actually our most famous program is the polling place location work. Last November, if any of you Googled where do I vote, our nonprofit are the ones who work nationwide with election officials to collect and clean and quality assure that data, and then we work with Google to make sure that anyone can Google it. Last November, around 30 million people Googled that information. So this is I see this as an opportunity, and I think the Knight Foundation will see this as an opportunity to bring together a lot of different pieces of tech that they have invested in with an incredible test case in New York and really make this an example that the rest of the country would like to follow. Knowing the people I know at the Knight Foundation, I think they'll find that pretty compelling.
So the process is that we have the placeholder, and if the commission so permits, then we would be able to identify New York City as our city partner. Then the Knight Foundation decides whether they want greater detail, a full proposal, which we would then work with staff and the commission to detail exactly what tools would be provided, how they would be customized, and what the budget would be. And Common Cause's role in this partnership is to help get the word out to the public. Because, as you know, just because you build it doesn't mean they will come. So we would be able to work with the full set of groups that are part of the New York Voter Coalition that we help to lead, and we would then be able to do outreach to help people sign up to receive email or text messages once the board has that capability. So we would be sort of the publicity arm of it. And the Knight Foundation has indicated that there's a relatively fast time frame on this. They hope to make a decision by June. So it would be actually possible to have something up and running for the 2016 presidential election, which, as you know, is when most people are looking for information about voting, and would really help the city be at the technological forefront rather than being criticized. So, we're very excited about the possibility of working with New York City, helping to customize the existing technology at a reasonable cost, which for the city, if we're successful in winning this grant, would be zero, to get it customized and up and running, and then to have the resources to do outreach to the public, to get more people to provide their emails or their text message identification. So that's the process, and we would be very happy to answer questions.
Yeah, hi. This is just a general question, but everything that we do is very highly regulated, and we are within a statutory framework, and we can't even put a dark line between contests without getting legislative approval. So I'm just trying to put some context into where I'm going with this. There's a statutory notice that we're required to give in August of every year, advising voters about primary elections and where they vote and whatnot. So to the extent that we would be giving additional notifications, is that something that we would need legislative approval for to be and it's not a question really for you, it's just a question. I mean, can we do all of these other things, given our limited charter and our ministerial role of doing what we're told to do by the legislature?
So, subject of course to staff correction, my understanding is that you can do more, you cannot do less. And I'd like to point out that the state-sanctioned registration form now allows voters to provide their email address. And one of the challenges that I know has been discussed by the commission and by staff is the fact that while voters and members of the public can sign up on the commission's website to receive email notices, that the actual sign-up rate has been relatively low. And one of the things we would hope to do is to make available to the public the information that they can communicate through email. But also, I'd like to point out that tracking the mail notice that you referenced would also be a subject of a benefit to the public, and I think a benefit to the commission in being able to answer the questions that Executive Director Ryan says he fields on a regular basis from people who, for whatever reason, didn't receive their notice or didn't realize they received it.
One of the things that we've looked at when these various issues come up is whether or not we could supplant the paper notification, the written notification, that's most of it is required to go out by first-class mail, with some type of electronic notification. Based on the current statutory framework, we cannot do that.
Right.
But there is certainly nothing that stops us for, we cannot replace paper mail, first-class mail notification with some type of electronic notification. But there is certainly nothing that prevents us legally or otherwise from doing extra. So as long as we're still sending out our annual voter information notices, and keep in mind that this challenge, the Knight challenge, is really separate. It's really dealing with the absentee ballot. So when somebody's asking for some information, we're going to give them the ability to know that they've received it and we've sent it and all of that good stuff. What I kind of flipped it around and challenged Seth when we met with him was, how do we expand it to do all of these other things that we want to do, because there is a need within the agency to have that technological ability, because it would streamline our process, I think, greatly. The other thing that I have a concern about is now that a public discourse has been raised in the City Council, and the specter potentially of legislative mandate is looming, whether the city council, again, and I will stress, we have not conceded the point yet that the city council has the authority to mandate us to do it. But the talk is out there that they may try to do it, and it's more real than not at this point.
Do what?
Mandate us to track the absentee ballot applications, and we can make an argument, I think a credible argument, that they don't have the authority to mandate us to do that. But without even getting into that, the conversation is being had. At some point, that conversation could shift from the city council to the state legislature. And if it does, then we will be mandated to do it, and at that time we'll be mandated to do it, and it will be on the public dime, as opposed to if we take advantage of this opportunity, which I think is kind of like icing on the cake right now for us. We have then an opportunity to do it when some benevolent organization is foot in the door.
How long will this partnership last?
It would be up to staff to determine how they want to structure it, I think. It's relatively flexible.
My understanding is that once it was established, unless I missed something, Mr. Flaxman, was once it's developed, it's ours to use,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And once we develop it, the partnership is to develop it and to get it off the ground, and then, I can't imagine Seth is gonna hang around with us if he's already fixed something here. He's probably gonna go and move on someplace else and try to fix something somewhere else, so.
Yeah. Although also, I mean, my vision, I'm a New Yorker, and we're based in New York. My vision, honestly, is that we can start here, and then all the great ideas that Executive Director Ryan says we can start helping to work on. I would love to make New York City the sort of shining example of what you can do with this new technology that doesn't cost that much.
So, Mr. Ryan, what's your recommendation?
Well, my recommendation clearly is that we try to take advantage of this money that's out there. And by the way, I think Ms. Lerner made it clear, we might not win. I mean, it's a competitive process, so we have to put in a credible application and then be approved by the Knight Foundation. So that's not a fait accompli. But I would certainly suggest that we do our best to take advantage of this potential money that's out there. And I would also like to thank the Voter Outreach Committee, because I think it's as an outgrowth of that public conversation that this idea became known to myself and Ms. Sandow, and clearly, we took the opportunity to have that conversation.
You said this was presented to the Voter Outreach Committee?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
We had a
Yes.
discussion, we never
Right.
voted on it. We didn't-
Right, we didn't
Right.
vote,
He just brought
but
it
they
up.
actually
This is
briefed
the
us
first time we're
similarly
hearing
at our
about
committee
specifics.
meetings.
Right.
I think we need more time to think about that than just having it vote on it. Personally.
Yeah,
I would like, it says here, it helps determine, you're gonna help in 2017 to turn out voters who regularly turn out in federal elections. Your software, how's it gonna do that?
So our nonprofit does a few different programs, and I think that we were describing, I'm not sure exactly which sheet you're reading, but we might be describing a different program that we run. But one of our programs is a website, Turbo Vote, and the idea is anyone can sign up for these sort of reminders online, and we'll help them whether it's absentee ballot deadlines or registration deadlines. We'll send text message reminders, things like that. And in 2012, the stats were that the people we helped register for the first time, 75% voted, and of those we helped re-register, 80% voted. But what we've done is we've basically taken the core parts of that technology and we're like opening it up for election officials. So you don't have to sign up on our site if you want to get these reminders. And you guys can track ballot. We can't track ballots. Only election officials can track ballots. So we want to open up that technology to you there as well.
What was the purpose of this grant, if we were to put in an application? Is it limited to this ballot tracking, or what are we talking about specifically?
So in the meeting I had with Executive Director Ryan and also the Sandow, we had talked about a few different ideas in terms of how we would want to focus the application. The ideas that we talked about were, like what you said, number one, ballot tracking. Let's put the barcodes on all of them. Let's also implement the ability to sign up for text message and email reminders. And then we can sort of leave it loose at that point, and then the money could be spent however you want to along the lines of using those technologies. It could be texting polling place locations. It could be also emailing information you provide in the mail. But we wouldn't have to determine that before the application deadline. That could be determined just by staff on an ongoing basis.
So we decide what to spend the grant on?
Within the confines of using the technology, yes.
So you met with our outreach committee and discussed all this?
No, not specifically this. They told us about it, we didn't know that it was available.
Yeah, do we have any idea what the cost might be of trying to implement just say the ballot tracking piece of this? Do we have any idea what that would cost, and would that be part of the application? So if we're going to embark on this, that we're sure we're going to get enough money so that it's not like Teddy Roosevelt sending the Navy to Japan when they only funded half a trip and said, well, they're going to have to fund to get it back. So the question is, how much money will this project take, and is that what we're asking for, or how does that lay out?
Again, the range of grants that they give out is within the range that we've talked to other states in terms of the price. So this is still relatively confidential, but we were talking to a state about implementing this technology, and they don't have a grant that would support it, and the cost would be around $200,000. And so I'm imagining it. We would want a grant at least that size, and anything above there, we could probably do more and better.
And there's outreach.
I suspect there are additional steps to this, because I know the borough offices have lots of trouble in a crunch time in trying to process the absentee ballots. And now we have another phenomenon that we've had in the last presidential election called early voting. And people will get absentee ballots and vote them, and we have a whole host of issues regarding that. But we have the process of 3 envelopes and putting the right one inside the right thing, and getting sometimes the application back, and if it's put in the envelope, there's a whole host of specific processes that go into the absentee ballot process. Is it contemplated that the barcode would go on the envelope that goes to the voter, and then it would also go on the second envelope that would come back? And exactly how is this?
So yes. The idea is we want to help voters track their ballots coming to them and then also returning to the office.
So are we talking about inputting on, I guess, is it a printing process, or each one would be different then, and we're going to need separate envelopes? And how much is in other words, because each person's ballot is going to need to have a separate barcode number on it. So how does the barcode get on the 2 different envelopes, the one going and the return envelope?
So I'd love to answer that. When we built the system in 2014, we built it in collaboration with 8 counties across 8 different states, and each one had a different process for how they put the barcodes on their pieces of mail, because we wanted to build a system that was flexible enough for everyone to use. And so I'd be happy to provide this list also in terms of who we work with to build it. But Travis County, Texas, which is Austin, Martin County, Florida, Yolo County, California, Missoula County, Montana, Boone County, Missouri, Johnson County, Kansas, Jefferson County, Colorado, and Marion County, Oregon. So we worked with all of those folks to develop the technology, and so whatever the process is in New York, we'd be able to fit with it. Some people, they just want to print it on labels and stick them on. Other people want to print it directly on the envelopes.
Yeah, but I think if you design it and build it and all, there's additional hard cost to it. That's what I think you need. The
That's what I
hard
was-
cost, if we have 4 million envelopes and we have to now make sure the 4 million envelopes have to go inside another 4 million envelopes, that those barcodes have to match. That's
So,
individually.
right, so we would contemplate as part of the process of putting together a reasonable and effective proposal that hard costs for at least the startup period would be incorporated into the proposal, right? The cost of printing, if there were some special printer or labels that were needed, that would be something we would be asking the foundation to cover the cost of, in addition to part of a budget that would go towards outreach and letting the public know that this is available.
I would assume that if this were to go forward, our executive director, our IT staff, our printing vendors, they would all be a part of the process of working out.
Well, certainly, if we make an application and a grant award is made, and that grant award is woefully insufficient to meet our needs, then there's not gonna be, there hasn't been a grant in history that forces you to take it if you don't want it, because the outlay is too great.
Which is my issue, because the initial question right here before us is whether or not we just submit the request for the application by the deadline. What we choose to do afterwards is something different, which is
Work out the
correct, we can have a full discussion with respect to that. I think it would be foolish not to make the request to see if we even qualify, and then have the discussion from there, what application we want to implement or not.
What if we decide there's a lot of it we don't want afterwards, then we have.
Yeah, we have the option not to
Put something in somebody's.
Reject the grant, if it undermines what we want done.
When I give it to the next person.
I would imagine that Knight has within its process the ability to recirculate monies that are unspent by a jurisdiction.
I can actually share, I was a judge on the Night News Challenge panel around 2 years ago, and that exact situation happened where they were going to give an $800,000 grant to an organization, and then the organization had some issues without sort of naming names, and it didn't go through, and they were able to re-award it. So they're pretty good at this stuff.
So you're gonna develop the technology, or you're gonna give it to us to use, and you're gonna use it throughout the process.
So it depends exactly, I guess, on which piece of tech we're talking about. So, for example, with the ballot, like so
What is it we're talking about?
for creating
Just
labels.
the ballot tracking, correct? Just the ballot tracking?
So just for ballot tracking, the way the tool works is we have a website that you go to, or New York City would go to, where that would allow them to easily create these labels, or create these barcodes, basically. So you could, if you wanted to, run the code locally, it's open, but part of our service that we provide as a nonprofit is like hosting it and making it easy. So it would ultimately be up to you if you wanted to just run all the code yourselves, but that, we have software engineers, this is what we're sort of made to do.
So your people wouldn't be touching the ballots at any time?
No, not at any time. We would be in a supporting role for you all.
I'll just put it up for a vote. Will the commissioners vote to apply for this grant and then later decide whether we want to use the grant and for what purpose? Yes or no?
It's a motion, yes.
I'll make a motion to apply for the grant at this point.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All opposed? All abstentions? I abstain. Carries.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Michelle.
Put that in the minutes.
I have something to add to the agenda.
You want to add something?
Mike, are you done?
No, we just had
We're going back.
the budget testimony It happened. March 19th. Coincidentally, the same date that the placeholder was due on the night challenge. Basically, what we did was we took our modified average, and what we did was we took fiscal year 12 and fiscal year 14, and we came out to a modified average of $132.5 million. That was 2 years that we thought were representative of what we expect in fiscal year 2016. And we used that modified average to calculate what we think we would need to spend this year. And we also assumed the restoration of the shortfall that is currently in the mayor's budget. So
How much of a shortfall?
I believe, and I don't have it in front of me, but we were, I think, at 86, 88 million. But there's always a shortfall in the mayor's preliminary budget, and then that's where the city council and the mayor get together and they figure out what the individual agencies might need to become whole. So we had a shortfall. We presumed, for the sake of our testimony, that the shortfall was not going to remain, and in any event, we put out what we thought we would need, which is a modified average of 132.5 million. So that was the modified average for FY12 and FY14. So what we asked for was actually $144.8 million. The additional $12 million or so comprised two basic elements. And you can actually break them up into 1 and 2, which consist of 2A and 2B. One is our warranty for the machines, DS200s, that was mandated by law at the time, and we had for 5 years from 2010 to now, is sunsetting, that will sunset at the end of this year. So we needed to include some monies in FY 2016, since this current warranty contract will end in December of 2015. We needed to include some monies in there for the warranty. We put in a worst-case scenario placeholder of $2.2 million. Mr. Norris, am I right about that? 2.2, right?
Is this ES&S?
ES&S is warranty. Now, irrespective of, and we'll, once we get the funding, then we'll have a discussion about exactly what we're going to do with the warranty. Irrespective of whatever level 1, 2, or 3 warranty we end up going with, we have to, in order to ensure the machines remain able to function in the field, we have to do battery replacement. Battery replacement has to happen this year during this off year, no matter what, because we cannot run the risk of allowing battery replacement to go into 2016 when we have 4 election events in 2016. So battery replacement has to happen now, and then
Price tag, roughly?
well, it all depends on how we do it, and we have a couple of different scenarios on how we might do it with the vendor. Some of it involves our staff, some of it doesn't. And then the question is, are we just replacing the discs, or are we going with there's a second battery, a lithium battery that also needs to be replaced. So there is a potential price tag on it based on a menu that the vendor would like us to use, a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3. And depending on our funding, we'll then come back and discuss the various options. But suffice to say, we're not going to be in a position, and I can tell you, I can say this with confidence from either the city council, the mayor's office, or even our vendor, where we roll machines out to the field without the battery replacement having been done. Now, one of the things that we want to do within that context is do a battery replacement, do a preventive maintenance, and also have our staff be trained while this is happening on how to do the preventative maintenance so that we can become more vendor independent moving forward.
I have a question on that. The ideal plan was, in 2010, when we voted on this, we voted vendor independent by the time we get to 2015.
Yes.
What's the status of that? I mean, I know Commissioner Michelle and I've had numerous discussions with John Brady and various other departments and our own staff, which went to that in training. And it doesn't seem to be much movement on them being trained by the appropriate people.
Right.
Are you aware of anything?
The status on that is, within the context of this level of maintenance, the battery replacement, et cetera, we're going to bring our staff in, and within that context, have to be tested to make sure that they can actually do the work. And the basic way that it's structured is, there's potentially a level 1, 2, and 3 VMT. Right now, figure we're all at level 3, until we actually can test these folks and see if anyone can graduate to level 2, and then ultimately to level 1. Level 1, if we were ever in a position where we had actual staff here that could do that, would be able to basically do whatever ES&S can do. That will ultimately require a real training, not just hanging out in the warehouse, hey, can you do this or that training. That's going to require real training, likely folks going out to Omaha, if not going out to Omaha, have the Omaha people come here and do the training. It's a real classroom, a real course. They would get a certificate at the end of it that they have a certain level of certification. The more realistic level, especially in the short term, is the level 2, where our techs would be able to do a real full-blown preventive maintenance.
Can we have John Brady maybe at the end of this month, the end of April, come up with some kind of plan on this testing that we're intending to do? At least
like a
kind of
calendar.
report or something.
Well,
Of what the state, where he thinks we're gonna be going within the next 6 months with respect to this training. Because we've been waiting since
Right.
2010.
we have documents that I can definitely share with the commissioners. I will say this, from my involvement in the process, it's not just John O'Grady. It really is a partnership with the vendor.
Yeah,
John
because
Brady's the head of that department, and he's the one that I've always been told to speak to.
I understand.
So if it's not him, then
I understand. What I'm saying is, he is not individually situated to make that determination. It really is a partnership with the vendor. So the point is, if that presentation, the simple point I'm trying to make is, if that presentation is going to occur, it cannot be solely with John O'Grady. We have to get somebody from the vendor in as well, because there are judgments that they make independent of us, whether or not our staff is capable of servicing their machines before they're willing to make that handoff.
Yeah, but
I
you're-
accept and respect that, and then whoever needs to come before us, within a month or a month and a half, whatever time we need, but just have them come before us and give us some kind of timeline of where we're going with this, because it's been, I think, in my opinion, it's just too much time. With
And
no
also, like anything, a vendor never wants to leave. So he's never gonna give you 100% saying that it's time for you to take over, because he loses part of the contract. And I've only been here since 2013, and since I was here, they've been telling us that you're gonna be level 2, you're gonna be level, and it hasn't happened.
Well, I can say this, the reason that we put the placeholder in the budget for the higher number is so that we don't get caught short, because ultimately we have the responsibility of making these elections come off without a hitch. But secondarily to that, the vendor does have a structure in how they want things to be done. Level 1, level 2, level 3. I have made it clear to them that we are not going to be bound by that. In other words, buy the level 1, which is the highest cost, and you're stuck with that in all 5 boroughs. And so our conversations have led us to the point where we're going to need some form of a warranty. But we're going to build flexibility within that warranty to say, if there is a particular borough or boroughs that have technicians of greater capability that can do the work, well then they'll get a lesser maintenance package because we'll be assuming more of that work ourselves. So we're not gonna be tied to this grandiose structure that's been put in place by the vendor. We'll be able to, for lack of a better term, mix and match. If we have a particular county that needs level 1 for all of its needs, while we're working towards getting their techs up to, more up to speed with respect to work that quite frankly they haven't done before, right? So to some extent we're not going to know until it happens. But this has been a real conversation, and part of the problem, at least recently with respect to, if you want to call it a delay, is the budget process. We got to get through the budget process, see what we're going to get, right? And then, once we get budgeted for definitely the batteries, which is immediately a $500,000 expenditure, right? We got to be able to do that work, and then within the context of doing the battery replacement, that's when the training for the preventative maintenance will occur, because it makes sense to do it right at that juncture because the machines are open. So we got to get through this now, do it in 2015. Battery replacement has to be completed in 2015, because we can't get to 2016 and not have that work done, because we have 4 election events citywide in 2016 potentially. So I've attempted, and I think I have imposed some structure on this. And I've also made it clear to the vendor that we're not simply writing the vendor a check and they're going to get, top dollar for everything. And that we're going to have some layered structure that in some places we may be getting very little warranty service because our staff is capable of doing all the necessary work. In other places, we may need a higher level warranty while the staff gets up to speed. So I think I appreciate from the commissioner's perspective how it would appear that there is no movement on it and no conversations have occurred, but I can tell you from executive management's perspective, this is something that we are, I would say we have addressed it, because that would presuppose that there was a full resolution that I could present, but it is something that has been part of our discourse back and forth, not only internally at our meetings, but definitely with the vendor, and there has been some progress, although not tangible progress. Yeah, I'm certain that I could have Judd Ryan be here. We'll pick a meeting date. I'm also pretty certain that he's going to be in town for the May 5th special. But basically, the bottom line is they'll come, assuming that they don't have an election elsewhere, which I don't think they do. They had one in February in Chicago. He's pretty much available on whatever notice. I mean, if you tell him to come, he'll come.
What is our ballpark figure for staff training for preventive maintenance or range?
We're going to train everybody, and then they're going to get tested. And the folks that pass the test, which is going to be a combination of a written test and a practical hands-on.
By the way, is this primarily our VMTs?
Yes, it's going to be all VMTs. And so those folks will be tested, and the ones that meet the criteria, both that they have the manual dexterity to actually do the work and can pass the written portion of the test, which is in the process of being developed. Once that's done, then those folks will be able to do the preventive maintenance.
Ballpark, I asked about math, money.
Well,
approximately.
Like I said, the battery replacement by itself is $500,000.
Right, got that.
Right, and then in terms of the training, the training is really negligible because we pay the per diem with respect to the folks that come in, to us. So it's about $1,800 a day. It doesn't. I'm not anticipating this is going to be a month-long training. It's going to be a few days. So the training piece of it's negligible. The real issue though is getting the training done so that we can do the preventive maintenance ourselves. That's going to allow a couple of things, right? I mean, some vendor independence, which you always want, but it's also going to allow us to develop a schedule where the preventive maintenance gets done on a regular basis, as opposed to the way it's being done now, which is Not really. So we want to be able to get as much lifespan out of these machines as we possibly can in preventive maintenance. Anybody that owns any kind of machine knows that you change the oil in your car and it lasts longer, right? Well, these machines are no different. So,
Well, no, I was just like to separate the concept of warranties. There's warranties that deal just with the machinery itself and the parts, then there's the labor part of the warranty. And that would, as Commissioner Shamoon is saying, is called the service agreement. So we've been having trouble with
we have to add one little piece into this as well.
Okay.
But also the software.
Right.
Which on these machines.
Right.
Yeah.
That, good point, but that's sort of where I'm going.
Right.
The training has to do more, in my view, with what you would call a service contract, where if there's a problem, you call up the guy, they come and they fix it. What we're trying to do is be able to have our own people do it. And Commissioner Arajo hit the nail right on the head, that we've been told that this is a 5-year project, and we've been trained already, so that our guys should be at a relatively, I won't say highest level, but certainly not the lowest level of being able to do repairs themselves. That's at least what I have been led to believe. And if it's not the case, then we really need to maybe have that program start. And to the extent that it's only $1,800 a person, if we have to have it in 5 boroughs for a week to 5 days to train each of those guys, we got to get them up to at least a good level 3, and maybe should be by now a level 2.
Right.
But we also need to focus in terms of warranty, as you say, on the software and the hardware and the machinery itself, because they'll kill us with replacement parts and things of that sort.
Right.
And we had found that there were, the intake brushes, what the heck they call that, would be the fingers? No, whatever. But whatever it is that sucks it in, we've had a lot of trouble with that. And a number of us on election day have been going around trying to lift it out and pull the ballots out because they're not working that well. So let's not lose sight of the other parts of the warranty.
One of the, and I gotta tell you that the conversation with the vendor about the warranty has been an evolutionary one, because I wanted to make sure that we had flexibility within it, and also that our staff is tested properly so that we can have confidence that they can actually do the work, right? So that component is happening, and it's about to come together, and it's like everything else. Sometimes, in government you need inertia, and in this particular case, the budget process is providing that inertia to make it kind of happen now, as opposed to maybe happening 4 or 5 months ago. So, like I said, where we ultimately have confidence after the staff is tested and we know that they can do it, where we have confidence that the staff there is capable of doing it, we'll have a lesser need for a more expensive warranty. And in those areas, if there are areas, maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised and there are no areas, but if there are areas where we do need the more expensive warranty, what I wanted to make sure, and I got the assurance from the vendor, is that we're not going to be bound, because it's one contract, to buying one warranty, as a one-size-fits-all warranty.
And for how long a period is this?
Well, it's interesting. We kind of are the 800-pound gorilla, and the vendor seems to be very accommodating to us. So the warranties have intervals. Obviously, the longer you buy it for, the unit cost goes down. But I basically have them at the point where they'll do it for as long as we want or as short as we want. So if we decide that, we're at, say, a level 1, which is the most expensive warranty in a particular spot, and we could bypass level 2 and 3 and go simply to a break fix, which means if the machine breaks, they fix it, we'll have the ability to do that as well, and everything in between. And they're very cognizant, because I keep making them cognizant of the fact that we don't have a blank check, and we just can't, write checks for whatever they think we need. We have to, maintain fiscal integrity. But by the same token, with respect to the budget, we can't get ourselves hung out to dry either. So that's why we put the higher number amount. But I don't believe it's going to come in at the 2.2 million. I believe we're going to come in significantly less than that. But until this process happens and we figure it all out, and it's always easier to give money back than it is to ask for more if you underestimate. And that's where I think, from a responsibility perspective, we landed. So that was the 2.2. Now the other 10, with respect to that, is a combination of the contract that we're going to need to ultimately finalize with ETA, which is not a competitive bid contract. It is a federally mandated, ultimately, contract. And where we landed with that, ultimately, is ETA Eventari Associates. There was quite some back and forth between the law department and Eventari and our folks. Originally, there was some hourly rate that was trying to be negotiated. And the bottom line is, none of that worked, and where it landed is it's going to be a not-to-exceed contract, not to exceed $5,000 per poll site for the work that Eventari needs to do. And for the poll sites that have been surveyed up to this point, it's been averaging about $4,300. Mind you, Eventari is working presently at risk and at the faith that the budget process will be completed and that we will ultimately comply with the federal court mandate and finalize the contract. And when we do, they'll ultimately get paid. So, that was a big chunk of it, of that additional 10, and the remaining work is, and the remaining monies are, and this was complete guesswork really on our part. We anticipate that we're going to need monies to do some temporary remedial work at poll sites, whether it be through temporary ramps, et cetera, et cetera. And that really can't be finalized until this surveying process is finalized, and we find out where we land, whether or not the poll sites could be relocated. You might come up with a price tag of $50,000 to do a remediation at a poll site, and then through some neighborhood, investigation, you might find that we could actually move the poll site to a place, not so far away and not have that expenditure. So, again, a lot of this is unfolding, and I know that we'll be talking about some more of this litigation in executive session, but it is a complex process. But I also don't want to give the impression that it's a complete dark cloud hanging over the agency. Yes, we're doing stuff, but the majority of the surveys that we've gotten back really require relatively minor remediation. Some of it's signage, where we can fix stuff. Some of it's the placement of a cone, typical traffic cone beneath an overhead structure, so that a sight challenged person walking with a cane wouldn't walk into this protrusion. I mean, there's things that are that minor. And then you can take it all the way from that, kind of what I'll call low-end fixes, relatively easy fixes, up into some places that might need some capital work to build a ramp, or might need to have their doorways widened and things like that. I mean, so, and it's kind of the Penelope in between.
Just on that issue right there, I know John O'Grady had come before the commissioners, maybe about a year and a half ago, with an idea. He had some HAVA money, I think, left over for creating a movable poll site. Has there been any other further discussion? I know Commissioner Shaw had a discussion with him. We were talking about a trailer or a
Fifth wheel.
A fifth wheel truck, an RV.
We have not advanced that. Since I've been here, I could be honest with you.
Have the drawings done.
Right. We've had some. I know there's been some, kind of ad hoc discussions about it, but certainly it hasn't moved forward. And even if it did, the breadth of the problems that we're talking about here wouldn't be solved by something along those lines. The other thing with respect to to this the compliance issues are, we have been investigating, acquiring temporary ramps. It is clear there is no one vendor that can handle the work that we would need done because of the time crunch. It's not like you're just setting up the temporary ramp and then walking away. We need them set up and then removed within a very specific time frame, and then, often in years over multiple times a year. There is no single vendor out there that can do that. So along those lines, we have reached out to the Mayor's Office of Operations, and the Mayor's Office of Operations has agreed to coordinate a meeting, which I believe is scheduled for April the 24th, if my memory serves me correctly, but it's coming up soon, where they're going to bring in the Department of Education, NYCHA, the Parks Department, and the Department of Transportation, at least those agencies and perhaps more, because we need to compare notes with those folks, A, so that they know what our problems are, and B, so that we can find out from them if there's any remedial work that's already been scheduled for their own agency ADA compliance issues. So right now, we looked at it from afar, and we're saying, wow, we got all of these problems. But the individual agencies often have the same problems that we have. So, there may be, ramp work that's scheduled to be done in a particular school that we don't know about because that level of communication is not happening. And that's why I reached out to Ms. Tarlow from the Mayor's Office of Operations. She's the director of the Ops Office, to say, hey, look, you're the best situated person, Ms. Tarlow, to be the point person on this. And your agency needs to be in the middle of it because that's where all of the crossover comes in. So that first meeting is going to be scheduled, like I said, for April 24th. It's going to bring in high-level people from every agency, and then we'll each pick the individual folks to do the handover.
Question related to that. We have a number of poll sites at NYCHA developments, certainly near the city public schools. Is there any conversation about them cost sharing or picking up the cost? Do they have any capital funding to help underwrite potential capital costs for polling site changes you might have to undertake?
It's interesting. On the one hand, I don't want to say, from a budget planning perspective, it always matters. But from the perspective of who's paying for it, it doesn't matter. Because we get our money from the same place that they get their money, the city of New York. So that's the purpose of this meeting on the 24th, is to try to, we're going to give them a list. We're going to give them a list of all the sites we have. So DOE will get a list of all our DOE sites. On that list, it will be highlighted what sites were already surveyed and what potential problems have already been identified. Hopefully many of them will be minor, some of them may be, some of them are certainly more than minor. And then we're going to start to, at that point, begin the process of comparing notes and say, okay, do you have any remedial work already scheduled that's in your capital budget? Might be in your capital budget for 2017. Could you move it forward and get it into 2016, to get this work done more quickly so that we can meet our mandates with the federal court? So all of that stuff, Commissioner, is on the table. It's a complex process. We were working it through the court case internally, and I did, as I said, reach out to the mayor's office because it came clear to me that we can't do it in a vacuum, that everybody that's potentially affected has to be at the table, and we're finding that one of the agencies that we didn't think would necessarily be so affected, but apparently is greatly affected ultimately is DOT. Because the way Evan Terry is doing their assessments is they're doing it from the curb cut where the person can be dropped off, wherever that may be, and then following the path all the way to the front door of the school. So that's one assessment of potential accessibility issues. And then you have a whole different assessment once you get inside, what's the interior of the building. Now, I've learned the phrase, and I can't really expound on it greatly, but the phrase cross-sloping, we used to only consider the perpendicular, the parallel slope. We also have to configure with the perpendicular perpendicular slope. In other words, the slope coming away from the building. So all of that, so you have a slope going up to the building potentially, and a slope coming away from that building, and that cross slope has certain standards that has to be met. And that's how their, Evan Terry is assessing all of this situation. So it's a big deal, but it's certainly one that we're on top of, and I believe that I am fully anticipating that we will get absolute cooperation from the Mayor's Office of Operations, having already spoken to Special Assistant to the Mayor before this meeting was set up, and they recognize their responsibilities in this regard as well.
I think it's a great idea. My only question is, are we using the same standards that they will be using in comparing what's acceptable, not acceptable?
No, Evan Terry is using the federal standard, which is, and I cannot speak to the particular elements of it, but I know from the conversation that I've had, is more stringent than the standard that the city of New York is currently using. So the standard for a whole place is greater than the standard for ordinary routine use accessibility. Now, that's a problem. And that's why we're having this high-level meeting, to let them know that.
So we're going further than the federal ADA law. The federal ADA law, we're going further?
No. In other words, the compliance with I think what he was saying was, compliance for election purposes is not the same as a regular housing development or a school might be.
Exactly. Once again, Commissioner Humane, you said in 2 words what took me half hours.
Well, yeah.
Hey, listen, I recognize my shortcomings, you know what I mean?
Well, we have, any further questions on this?
Commissioner Rendino has something.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. River Bay Water, in Co-op City, River Bay Management is having their annual election. Usually requesting 70 voting machines on loan from the board. They will incur all expenses to use them. They will hire our staff to be election day workers, which they do usually, equal amount of Republicans and Democrats. So they're looking to borrow 70 machines. I don't think we usually charge them for that.
What, the water machine?
Borrow machines.
They pay for insurance and transportation.
They pay for all costs, insurance and all that. We have done this in the past, right?
Co-op City, right?
This is Co-op City.
The old leather machines, yeah.
Not the new.
Can I have a motion?
Second the motion.
All in favor? All opposed?
Me, I'm opposed to this every year. We have adopted a policy of not doing this, and then we have the River Bay exception every year. So, I'm being consistent, that's it.
I abstain.
I move for executive session.
Okay.
Let's all go in.
In the future, the next meeting will be 2 weeks, April 14th.
Alan Flax, acting president of the New York City League of Women Voters. If you want to know why I say that, you should see there are 2 co-presidents who are lame ducks. 4 items, but I won't take more than a minute or so. First, I want to commend you for two-sided here, where it's not necessary to have a spreadsheet. Very good. However, color printing on photocopying is pretty cheap now. On some of your things like the modernized.
Do you have a question?
Is here. I would
Mr.
like to
Flax,
urge
do you
that
have
you
a
use
question?
color.
That's your question?
To use color so you could tell the difference on those charts. The second thing, I want to remind you that you're still not in compliance with the state election law on write-ins, and that boy up in Albany says that's right. And I did see an article, I should bring it in, how do you handle certain phrases like kill all the blank? The answer is that that's not really a candidate, so that you maybe ignore. But if we see Michael Michelle written in and nobody knows who he is, you gotta write that name in.
Mr. Flax?
Yes.
Are you asking a question?
Yes, I do have a
Please ask your
question. Mr. Ryan, if I may direct it there. How is your $125,000 a year Republican from Brooklyn diversity officer working out? Is she doing her job and getting us more Republicans into headquarters? And secondly, I may not have been here to hear it, but with regard to your legislative proposal and your mediocre luncheon you serve the legislators, so they said,
Mr. Flax,
I would like to know what's the latest.
Mr. Flax, please, state your question and keep your personal comments when you're insulting people. Thank you.
What, your culinary taste? On the issue of the 2 points in the legislative agenda of increased pay for the poll workers, is it my personal comment, but the patronage poll workers, and closing schools on primary day. Is there any inkling from the legislators how they felt on that? I spoke to Brian Kavanaugh, he told me his personal opinion, but I'd like to get the board's official response to those 2 points and your $125,000 a year diversity officer.
With respect to your last point first, I'm not going to have any public discourse on personnel decisions that have been made by the commissioners. That's number one. Number two, with respect to the poll worker pay increase, that was not only addressed in Albany, it was also addressed, as has been our practice over the last several years, and certainly for the 2 budget cycles that I've been here. We made it part of our request with the city council. And that's something that could happen by mayoral directive. We don't have to wait for the state legislature to act. No, I did not get any inclination as to whether or not any particular legislator is willing to carry that in either house. And with respect to the closing of the schools, my understanding is that there are presently 2 bills, an assembly bill and a same as from the Senate. Whether or not they get any movement will be the subject of the vagaries of the legislative process.
President Michelle, since Mr. Ryan mentioned the issue, responded to the diversity officer, I'd like to know why you commissioners, sua sponte, cannot see the proper balance of Republicans and Democrats here at headquarters, and why you had to pay out $125,000 to have someone do it, because I think that is really something under your purview.
Okay, thank you.
And to earn your $300 a meeting.
Thank you.
Who's in the first?
If anybody, I don't know.
I assume that you have no answer to that.
I don't know. So anybody not present when we return, the next meeting is
Hire
April.
Republicans. That's what
The Personnel Committee reports and recommends a 5% increase in the compensation put to all temp employees effective the pay period immediately following the implementation of the increases provided for in the collective bargaining agreement with Local 1183 CWA.
For the, not the regular temps.
Right.
Temp clerks. Temp clerks. Just temp clerks.
Temporary clerks, correct.
Temporary
And
clerks.
that's a committee report, so there's no second that needed.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All abstained? Unanimous. Happen in the executive session?
Yes, and also in executive session, we voted in connection with the United Spinal litigation, which has to do with various people with accessibility issues. The commissioners unanimously consented to the plaintiff's representative to observe the timing of the training. I was given something to read, and it's not in English. You should have gone to medical school. So I'm better off without this. That plaintiffs' representatives can attend the training classes to ensure that appropriate level of emphasis is being placed on training and accessibility training and concerns for dealing with voters with various accessibility issues. For both the trainers, training the trainers and training the poll workers. And that was unanimously approved.
We have leave.
Got it. The following issues were all resolved by unanimous vote in executive session. I believe there was this. Right, yes. Correction, and I'll correct myself, but the first one was a unanimous. Katarina Sohn, and that's spelled S-O-H-N, is hired as the Korean translator at an incoming salary of $40,628, and that the effective date will be subject to her immediate availability, so that the details will be worked out between the prospective employee and personnel. The next three matters were all Manhattan matters, and they are all by unanimous decision. All of these leave balances are hours that are being advanced, subject to repayment. That will be 70 hours for Reginald Stark, 105 hours for Tisha Tompkins, and 154 hours for Rennie Hill. And the last matter was a ratification of an executive committee from a decision from which Commissioner Arajo recused himself. Rachel Torres is granted an advance of time of 140 hours. Subject, it's retroactive to the date that she went on leave, which will be worked out by personnel, but it's also subject to repayment. And that concludes the matters as far as I'm aware.
Have a motion then.
Move to adjourn to 2 weeks.
2 weeks, April 14th at 1:30. Thank you, everybody.